Dear RyuDai students enrolled at EU Kenkyu and EU Kenkyu Nyumon lecture series, welcome to our first online lecture. My name is Till Weber. I am with the German department at Kokusai Gengo Bunka program here at RyuDai, and I'm gonna speak in English, but it's gonna be easy to understand, and you can obviously listen to it as often as you want. This is what we have in stock. There were no classes in April due to the corona pandemia. I hope you have all picked up your copy of the textbook and read it. It's called 12 Lessons on the EU. You can still pick it up in front of my office at Kyotsu Kyoiku Sangokan Ichichi-san. You can also download it in Japanese and in English from our web class page for this lecture series. Please check there from time to time because we will be posting materials and information on web class. Today I'm going to give you an introduction to the topic of the lecture series. Next week I'll talk about the history of Europe that led to the foundation of the EU, and the week after that I will be trying to explain how this very, very complicated political mechanism works. After that, two of my colleagues will take over. One is Miyazato Atsuko sensei from the French department. The other one will be Sakai Alberto sensei from the Spanish department. Frankly, we are not sure whether we can actually do all these lectures, all these topics in the remaining time of this semester, but we are determined we will give you a chance to do an exam and to earn 2 credit points, Nitani. We will find a way that you can earn those. Please follow the lectures and study the textbook. Let's begin. Well, obviously here there's a piece of wrong information. The European Union does not have 28 countries since February the 1st. It's 27 because Great Britain, the United Kingdom here, left. They are out. Still, much of Europe is covered by European Union member states, Central Europe, Western Europe, in Northern Europe, Eastern Europe and Southern Europe. However, there's a few spots on the map here, Switzerland and Norway there. Those two countries are not member states, but they have treaties that associate them very closely with the European Union. So many policies are the same there. And then we have a group of countries which are called candidate countries here. Countries that want to join the European Union, they have to fulfill some conditions and they haven't done that yet. So they are still outside. The one is the big country here, Turkey. Part of it is in Europe. And there's a group of smaller countries on the Balkans Peninsula who are also keen on joining the European Union. A little bit of history, more next week. In 1945, much of Europe was as destroyed as Okinawa was destroyed. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, wartime leader, got voted out. He was not re-elected. So a new group of political leaders on the European continent took the lead in founding what would become the European Union. Two French politicians, among them Robert Schuman and Jean Monnet, who worked closely with Konrad Adenauer, who was the first Chancellor of West Germany. These are among the founding fathers of the European Union. And this will end part 1 of this lecture. I will record part 2 very soon after. Sorry, we are still struggling with the technology. Part 2, the EU needs a number of symbols that are easily recognizable. Every country needs that too. And here they are, the EU symbols. One is the motto. It's united in diversity. meaning that every country, the peoples, every individual is different, diverse, but together we stand united. Then there is the money. You will have seen this symbol on coins and bills. It's the euro, a common currency used by many EU member states, but not by all. The third is the European flag. Here it always consists of 12 stars on blue ground, unlike the American flag. It's not updated when countries come and go. And if you feel like celebrating in a few days' time, there is May the 9th. It's Europe Day, the day when the most important founding treaty was signed. And lastly, and probably the most powerful symbol is the European anthem, which is a piece of music you are all familiar with, I think, by a very famous composer. Please enjoy. I'm sure you recognize the tune, the Ode to Joy by Ludwig van Beethoven, who was a most remarkable person, a composer who became deaf, meaning he couldn't listen to his own music any longer, but he could still compose such beautiful pieces over 200 years ago. All men will be brothers, the theme of the anthem. It's a dream that hopefully one day will become true. The next slide is this one. It's on the languages. You have 27 countries in Europe, and those 27 countries speak 24 different languages. You have them all listed here, and all languages are equal in the European Union, which means that there is a huge translation service. In Parliament, you can hear all these languages, and they are being translated into all kinds of other languages by highly qualified professional interpreters. it's a tough job, I guess. You need to be really good at languages. However, very few people outside Slovenia know Slovencina, the language of Slovenia, for instance, or Malti, the language of Malta. Practically, when they have everyday working meetings, conversations, people in the EU very often use English. Some also use French and a few German, so that's the main languages, but English has been the dominating language. However, with Great Britain now gone, the number of native speakers of English is very small. It's only the Irish that are left, so we will have to see what happens to the languages. Next is the enlargement process. You see that Europe used to be very small in the beginning. In 1952, when what would become the European Union was founded, it was only 6 countries: France, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, and Italy. And it grew to 28 countries in 2013 with the addition of Hrvatska, that's the Croat word for Croatia. Now we are back to 27. I mentioned that on February the 1st, the United Kingdom of Great Britain left the European Union. You have the term Brexit coined for this, Britain and exit. There was a referendum, meaning a public vote, in 2016, which surprised everybody. 51.9%, a slim majority said we want to leave the European Union. A long period of chaos and negotiation followed, but on February the 1st, Britain really left the European Union. So the current question is, it's out of the European Union now, but of course the economies, people's lives, even politics, and of course culture are deeply mixed. They can't be separated just by a formal treaty. So we need a deal. We need a new agreement how the relationships between Britain and the rest of Europe should be from now on. The question is, do we get a deal or do we get no deal, which would be pretty negative, especially for British people themselves. Europe is founded on the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, basic human rights. There are 6 titles, 6 major ideas, and all EU activities must follow these ideas. There's dignity, human dignity. For instance, that means there is no death penalty. Nobody will be executed for crimes in a European country. That is actually a point of much discussion with the government of Japan. Japan, as you know, upholds the death penalty. Europe is very much against it, and every year this is being discussed with Japanese politicians again. There is freedoms, the freedoms of movement. All citizens can move across Europe as they like. There is the principle, the title of equality. Men and women are equal. People of white, of black, of yellow, whatever color of skin are equal. Also, sexual minorities, LGBTIQ people, are equal to the majority of heterosexuals. Then there's solidarity. Solidarity means that strong countries ought to help the poor. If one country faces a challenge, the others should help. That's not always easy, because there is a huge gap in wealth. In Eastern Europe and in Southeastern Europe, countries are much poorer than, say, in Central and Western Europe. How much are the rich countries willing to give to help the poor countries? Citizens' rights. The 5th column means that there are European courts of justice, Saiban, Europa Saiko Saiban. If your if you cannot win a court case in your country and you feel that your country has violated your human rights, you can go to Strasbourg, where the European court is, and they will hear whether your human rights have been violated. And the same goes justice system. I just mentioned the justice system. Human rights, the fifth citizen rights I forgot to mention also includes something else. European citizens can vote in all European countries. It only takes 4 weeks of residence in another European country, and then you can vote there. You have the freedom to vote. Few basic data. The size of population in million people. You see the European Union has now 447 million people. Japan, I think 127 is too high. It's more 126 or 5 million in Japan now. You can see it's the third largest bloc in the world after China and India. Obviously, it's a lot of people. If you look at the surface area, the size of the country, obviously Russia is the biggest, the siziest country, and Europe is about half the size of China. I'm afraid I don't have newer graphics. How rich is the EU compared to the rest of the world? If you look at the left column, it's the gross domestic product, GDP, given in US dollars. That is the value of everything that is made, manufactured, economic activity conducted in a country or in a group of countries like the EU. And if you look at the EU countries, 28 in 2014, the GDP was higher than the United States. If you look at wealth per person, how much money does a person make in a year, if it was, of course, average, if it was fairly distributed. There you see in 2014, EU people made, the average income in a year was $27,400, and it's almost the same as Japan was in those days. The richest country, the country with the richest people definitely is still the United States. So living standards in Europe on average are similar to Japan. However, in the south and in the east, there are countries where the standards are poorer, and there's a few countries that are wealthier than Japan. For instance, the Netherlands, we should also mention Austria and Germany have higher income, and then Northern Europe, Denmark, Sweden, Finland also have higher income, more wealth per person than Japan these days. Have a look at how big European countries are. The surface area in 1,000 square kilometers. France is the biggest country. Look at the left, and it's followed by Spain, Sweden, Germany, Finland, and so on. The United Kingdom has been crossed out. And at the right side, you see the smallest European country, the island of Malta in the Mediterranean, tiny Luxembourg, Cyprus, Slovenia, Belgium, and so on and so forth. So you have big countries and small countries. You have populous countries and countries with very few inhabitants. The biggest population as it stands is in Germany, 81.2 million, followed by France, Italy, Spain, and Poland. And the smallest population, again, that's in Malta, in Luxembourg, on Cyprus, another island in the Mediterranean, and so on and so forth. Of course, small countries can easily feel dominated by bigger countries in the European Union. So that's something one needs to keep in mind. Now we come to the spread of wealth. Basically, this is how wealthy are people in a country. And the average of all 28 countries in 2015 is 100. So if you look at the left, Luxembourg, it was one of the smallest countries with the fewest inhabitants, but it is the richest country in Europe by far. It has 2.71 times the wealth per person than other countries. Small country in Central Europe, it has a huge banking industry and people are doing very, very well. And then, perhaps surprisingly, the next biggest rich country is Ireland. That wasn't the case before Ireland joined the European Union. Since Ireland had been in the European Union, it turned from a poor country to one of the richest countries in Europe and in fact in the world. It's followed by other small countries, Netherlands, Austria. The richest big country is Germany at 125, the fifth in the ranking. And then you can see other big countries, France, Italy, Spain, are rather in the middle of the table with average wealth. The poorest countries on the right is countries in the former Eastern Bloc, Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia, Latvia, Hungary, Poland. So these countries joined in the 1990s and afterwards, after the Soviet bloc collapsed at the end of the Cold War, and obviously they still have to catch up to match the wealth of the older members of the European Union. So the EU in Brussels collects money from the member states. In 2017, the EU budget, Yosan, was 157.9 billion euros. That's a lot of money. It's 1.05% of gross national income. That means if you live in one country, your country will pay 1% of what your country makes in a year to Brussels. It doesn't sound very much, but it adds up to a large sum, 157.9 billion. You can see the figure down here at here we are. That's it in Japanese yen. I'm sorry, I can't read that. Nancho desho kane. What's above cho? It's a huge amount of money anyway. And how does the European Union spend the money? The biggest chunk, almost half, is spent on jobs, competitiveness, and regional development. Basically, this is the money that rich countries give to projects in poor countries to make them catch up with the rest of the European Union. The European Union is building bridges, highways, airports, industrial structures, universities, and the like in poorer countries. The second chunk, at 37%, is basically agriculture. Here, the biggest country that benefits the most is France, because France has the biggest and wealthiest agricultural sector of all European countries. Also, environment, and recently, of course, environment protection has become a very, very big issue before Corona happened and got in front of that topic in terms of public attention. But global warming is going on, and the European Union is trying to promote a change in our way we treat the environment. And the rest is rather small. We have security, citizenship, the courts, justice. Then we have a global Europe. The European Union also gives money to African countries, for instance, development aid, ODA, and the like. The European Union also has programs that Japanese people can join, especially university exchange and research promotion programs. So some money goes there. And then administration and other. That's basically the salaries of the people who work for the European Union. Why the euro? We come to the currency, the money. On the map, you see those countries who do use the euro and those who do not use it. The advantage of having the same currency in several countries, actually that's a very new idea, isn't it? Have you heard in history that several countries used exactly the same currency? The advantage is the rates, the exchange rates, do not change. So the cost of converting your money into another money, also the money the bank makes by changing your money, all that is zero. That goes down to zero. It makes it cheaper to use money in other countries. This leads to more choice and stable prices for consumers. For example, in the past, when you wanted to buy a car, say you wanted to buy Volkswagen in Germany, then you would go to your German dealer and he would tell you, oh, the car is 20,000 euros. Now you can use the internet and check in a neighboring country like the Netherlands or Denmark. Volkswagen sells the same car, obviously, and you can check and you will find out very often in the Netherlands the car is not 20,000 euros, it's 18,000 euros. You can save 2,000 euros. Then you get in touch with the dealer in the Netherlands and you go and pick up your car or have it delivered to your home in Germany. There is no customs, no border controls. Usually, Corona age is a little different. And you can get your car for a cheaper price. That means that prices generally went down when the euro was invented, at least in theory. And then the euro made economic cooperation between European countries much easier. Obviously, when you use the same money, many things become more simple. Right? And the benefit for you as Japanese people when you travel to Europe, in all the countries that are marked in blue on the map, you can use the same money. You don't need to change money in every country you go and lose money while changing it. You can use the euro everywhere. Right, then I want to mention the coins. If we have the time in another class, I want to show that more precisely. One side, it's interesting, one side has national symbols, the countries that make the coins in their area, put their national symbol on it, and the other side is the common European symbol, the same for every €1 coin across all the countries. The currency, of course, needs management. It needs to be managed, and for this purpose we have the European Central Bank, ECB, which is located in Frankfurt. The president of the bank recently changed. It's Madame Christine Lagarde, a very experienced economic politician from France. The bank has several jobs to do. One is to make sure that prices are stable in Europe, that there is not too much inflation, ideally not too little either. It needs to control money supply and decides upon interest rates. It also checks that banks are safe. We have heard trouble after the Lehman banking crisis, that banks got into trouble, and probably people who had put their money into banks would see their money get lost. The central bank tries to prevent that. And it works independently. There is no government, national government or EU leadership that can tell Madame Lagarde how she has to do her job. She is really independent in doing it. We stay with the topic of economic policy. We have here another key word, the single market. 24 countries, or 27 if you include the non-Euro countries as well, have a single market. That means there are 4 freedoms of movement: goods, services, people, and money. There are no taxes, no customs, no tariffs charged when you send stuff from Portugal to Finland from Denmark to Spain, and so on and so forth. There's no border control. The same goes for services. You can have your bank account at a bank in your home country or in any other European countries. You can use it anyway. Then people are free to move. If you are an EU citizen, you can live in any of the 27 countries. You don't need a visa. You can work in the other country, and after 4 weeks, you can vote, locally vote in that country. And same for money. There are no controls. You can move your money across European countries. No country can tell you, keep your money inside our national borders. This single market has led to to a fall in several services and products. For instance, fares, airplane tickets have become much cheaper than in the past because there is now European-wide competition. You can book your air ticket from any country in any other country, anywhere you do it online. So LCC, low-cost carriers, operate much cheaper than they did before. Phone calls have become cheaper too. 3 years ago, the roaming fees, that is the cost of calling from one country into another, were abolished. Now it doesn't matter when you sit in Paris. You can call and make a call to France, or you can make a call to Poland or to Italy. The price will be the same. So these freedoms of movement are good for business, of course, but they also mean more choice for consumers, and quite a number of new jobs have been created through the single market. Freedom to move means that there are no border controls inside those European countries that have signed the Schengen Agreement. Obviously, it's different now in Corona ages. Many borders are closed for medical reasons, but once the Corona scare is over, the borders will be wide open again. It means there are no police or customs checks at borders between European countries. However, the external borders, that is borders between Europe and the EU and outside, especially between Europe and Turkey, Europe and North Africa, where refugees come in, those are better protected now than they were in 2015, when a big wave of refugees entered the European Union countries. Also, they need to be protected in these COVID-19 Corona pandemic times. Right. Let's move to the example of, this is just an example about mobile telephone use abroad. Since 2007, EU policy has brought down the cost by 80%. You don't need to follow this in much detail. Another aspect, we're moving away from the economy. We move to education. Erasmus Plus, I hope you have heard of the program. Every year, about 400,000 young people from European countries study in other countries. 400,000. It's many million since the program was started in the late 1980s. That means you can apply to study at a university other than in your own country. You can spend usually 1 semester. Other programs run longer. You can study there. You don't have to pay study fees. You actually get a scholarship, a small scholarship from Erasmus. And there is a European credit point transfer system, which means that the credits you earn at the foreign university can be used at your home university. So you don't necessarily lose time studying at your home university. Most people who use Erasmus Plus actually are students, university students, but it's also for job training, for youth exchanges, that would include Kokosei, for instance, and for sports events. Basically, it's a program for young people. The idea is that young people get to know other countries, other languages, other people, their way of thinking, and become better Europeans by broadening their horizon. And the good news for you is there's also a version of Erasmus Plus that applies to Japan. It's called Erasmus Mundus. Got that here. Every year, a number of students from Japan are selected and they get a European Union scholarship to study in Europe. So here, this is actually, it was renewed last year and it was made bigger and better last year. If you check out this homepage in Japanese language, you can find out about European Shogakin for Japanese students. So now let's put a face on the European Union, or actually several faces. I want to introduce three key players in the European, I call it a triangle. Obviously that's the triangle here. There's a balance of institutions and a balance of power. Well, let's start with the European Commission. The Commission is basically the European government. It's led by the president of the European Commission. Her name is Ursula von der Leyen, very experienced female politician from Germany, and she's also famous for being the mother of, I think, 8 children. A huge number, and it didn't stop her from having a very successful political career. Then we have the European Council. Oh, this is too much. We can actually cross this out. The European Council is the voice of the member states. Here, all 27 member states get together on a regular level, not just the heads of the states, but also ministers and lower level, working level bureaucrats. And they plan and decide upon common European policies. It's led by Charles Michel, who used to be the Prime Minister of Belgium, another very experienced politician. Finally, we have the European Parliament, EU Gikai, which is elected every 5 years across Europe. I'll give you more details a little bit later. It's the Parliament, and it's headed by a president as well, David Sassoli, who is from Italy. Here is a picture from a summit at the European Council. You remember the Council is the institution where the 27 member states meet and work together. The summit here means a meeting of the heads of state and government. And it's held at least 5 times a year. Usually then the President of France, the Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of Italy, and everybody else get together in Brussels and talk for 1 or 2 days, often through the night. Often they work through very difficult problems and emerge at 5 o'clock in the morning with a compromise. This is important. It sets the overall guidelines for EU policies. This is the most powerful part of the European Union. It's not the Commission, the European government, it's actually the 27 member states that hold the most power in Europe. Here are some of the major institutions. I'll explain that better in 2 weeks' time. We have the European Council, the summit, you see it here. That's what we talked about, where the heads of the states meet at least 4 times a year, and they work on the really, really big problems. The smaller problems are here in the Council of Ministers. That's more detailed. It's not so spectacular. Then we have mentioned the European Commission, the European government, who execute European policies. And we talked about the European Parliament with elected members of Parliament whose job is to control the European Commission. And there are many, many other European institutions, just a few. There's the Court of Justice, Saiban, so the Court of Auditors. That's the people who check finances in order that nothing goes wrong there. We have the European Investment Bank, which borrows money across Europe to businesses and also to countries. And then we have the European Central Bank, we talked about it, that guarantees the money, the euro, and other agencies, committees, and so on. The Committee of the Regions is pretty important. Europe is not only 27 states, Europe has more regions. For instance, if you look at the region of Basque, it's in northern Spain and southwestern France. Or if you look at the Celtic areas, that's in Ireland, in Wales, in Scotland, and in northern France. There's a lot of regions that go across borders. Not every people have their own country. And so this Committee of the Regions represents the voices of the regions and their interests. Right, we have the European Commission, the European government, headed, as I mentioned here, as by the President, Frau von der Leyen. It has 27 independent members, permanent members. Each European country can send one member. You could actually call this the ministers, and the Daijin and the Soli Daijin in this system would be von der Leyen's son. You can see you can see the flags here. You can see 27 different flags. Then you also see here which party they belong to. Blue is more conservative parties, red is social democratic parties, then there's the green parties, and so on and so forth. This is the government. They think about new legislation, new laws, they guarantee the treaties, they represent the EU on the international stage. That is this gentleman's job is from Spain, Josep Borrell. He is basically the foreign minister, Gai Mukan Daijin of the European Union. And it has the goal of promoting the number of female commissioners. 50-50 is the goal. One man, one woman. It used to be all men in the past. It has changed now. If you look how many women are in this government, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 women and 15 men. It's not yet 50-50, but I hope one day it'll be a standard principle everywhere in Europe. Let's just highlight this gentleman from Spain, Josep Borrell. He is officially it's called the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security. He is conducting foreign policy. He is also the Vice President of the European Commission. He heads the External Action Service. There is, for instance, there's an EU delegation, call it embassy, no, Taishikan, to Japan in Tokyo. He is the boss of people working there. And you can see it's a job that implies traveling here. This is the lady Mogherini-san from Italy, who was the previous EU High Representative for Foreign Policies. She has been replaced last December by Mr. Borrell. Let's talk about the European Parliament, the voice of the people. The European Parliament, like all parliaments, does mainly two things. It makes laws and it makes the budget. It decides about the budget. It works together with the other parts of the EU. And you see, it's a very big parliament. It has 705 people split among countries. The United Kingdom is out now here at the bottom left. And you see the countries get seats according to their size. Which was the biggest country? Most people here, Germany. Second biggest, that was France. Then we come to Italy, Spain, Poland, and so on and so forth. And the smallest countries, the tiniest countries, it's actually these two here, have 6 members each, which is more than their proportional share, but 6 is the minimum representation in Parliament. The European Parliament gets elected every 5 years. Here you see the political affiliation. You can split the parliament along national lines, but there's also political parties. There's conservatives, Hoshiteki, there is social democrats, Shakai Shugi, there's Kyosanto, there is nationalists, there's Jiyuto, liberals, and there's the Greens from many countries you can see here. They form up factions and try to make their view of the world, their ideology, count when European laws and the budget is being decided. The European Court of Justice, you see here, 27 judges. It's a very large court, one from every country, and they have the final say to interpret European laws. And they have one very important function. They can check European member countries that violate European laws. For instance, the government of Poland has lost in the European Court many times because the government in Poland is a very, very conservative nationalist government, and they want to change the way judges are appointed and the way judges work in their country, so that only people who are friendly to them can be in the courts. Obviously, that cannot be. Courts need to be independent and they cannot be dominated by one political party after European ideas. So there were a lot of lawsuits in the European Court of Justice, and the Polish government lost them all, and they had to change their national laws after they lost in court. If they didn't do it, they would risk being excluded from the European Union, or at least losing some money. The European Union is also a place where many people work, civil servants like Kommunen. It has, you can see, 23,000 permanent civil servants from all countries work there, plus temp workers as well. So it's a big employer too, and it's a very desirable career for young Europeans to work in Brussels and Strasbourg or elsewhere for the European Union. I think we don't need to follow this in detail. Please have a look if you care. European bureaucrats are not popular in every part and not popular with every European, I need to say. There's the term the Eurocrats, EU and bureaucrats. That's derogative, it's negative. Some people in Europe feel that the European Union interferes too much in their ordinary lives, that there are too many European laws. Certainly the government of Poland will feel that way, but also many people in Great Britain felt that way. They felt that their nation's rights were diminished and European rights were put in place. And usually it's nationalist people who don't like it, or conservatives, because European laws tend to be very modern and progressive, and not everybody likes this kind of shimpo teki na kangaekata desu ne. So, questions about the European Union. You can do this. Europe Direct is a huge information system. You can use it by phone, by email, by web chat. It's online, of course. It has 500 regional information centers. In fact, there is a European access point in the library of the University of the Ryukyus. In our library, we have a European collection of materials and access to a data bank that contains all official European Union documents. It's probably millions of pages in 24 languages. If you want to do serious research, you can do that very well here in Okinawa. The other aspect here is the delegation of the European Union to Japan, which I would like to call embassy, Taishikan. Some of you were present in January here at RyuDai. We had the honor to host Mrs. Patricia Flor, who is the current ambassador of the European Union to Japan, and she delivered a lecture here at RyuDai for us. This is the link if you want to check out online. There's lots of materials to be had. This brings us to an end for today. Thank you very much for following these online lectures. I hope you had no technical problems. And now we come to the homework. Please write an email to me. That's my address. What should be in that email? Please tell me about this online lecture. It's the first time I did it. I really don't know whether it was good for you or not. Please tell me openly. If you have negative comments, I will certainly not be angry, but try to improve and to get better. Could you understand well? What could be improved? Any hint is welcome. Any other comment? It's the first part of your mail. Second part, please let me know what you are interested in the field of Europe and the EU. You have all led the 12 lessons. You have heard this lecture. Surely you have picked up things you would like to learn more about, you find interesting, curious, or just don't understand. Please ask me these questions or tell me straight away. And my colleagues and I, we can try to integrate these things into the lectures, into the lessons online. And finally, about the language, please do not write in Japanese. Let's play a little bit European Union here in this class on the web. Let's use as many European languages as they do. Well, or rather not 24. And I must admit, I don't understand Estonian or Latvian or Greek. But we can accept 5 languages. English is okay, German, French, Spanish, and Italian. Please write in one of these 5 languages and don't bother about small mistakes or so. Europeans speak English and they make mistakes all day long and they have a horrible pronunciation often and they don't give a damn about it. It doesn't matter. It's only the only thing that's important is that I can understand what you want to say. And that's it for today. Thank you very much. See you next week with the second lecture about the history of Europe. お疲れ様でした. Goodbye.